Welcome once again to Robin Hood versus Hollywood. Now, we've been comparing 5 20th century movies to each other and to the 15th century ballads that created the legend. But we're constrained by the fact that outside of a handful of names, the ballads and the movies don't really have much of anything to do with each other. This episode will discuss characters and events that, for the most part, only appear in the films, sometimes in only one or two of them. I ran out of time in the last episode and didn't get to everything I wanted to. So, in keeping with the film-only theme of this episode, and continuing with my discussion of Marion, I thought it would be cute, or stupid, your choice, to hold a Miss Nottingham contest. And our contestants are 1. Lady Marion Fitzwalter, a lady of the court. No further identification. Oh, and since each lady needs a lady-in-waiting, I thought I'd give them a nod too. Two, Lady Marion Fitzwalter, a lady of the court, an orphan and ward of King Richard. 3. Marion, no surname actually given, but would be Huntington, or of Huntington, being the daughter of the Earl. 4. Marion Dubois, which you don't find out until the end, cousin of the king. And 5. Marion of Bagel, a lady of the court. Surname invented by Mel Brooks so he could get in a lox and bagel joke. Loxley and Bagel, get it? Okay, back to the subject at hand. Let's start with the Plantagenet brothers, Richard and John, or the Angevin brothers, depending on which historians you read. It's not important for this discussion. Even though they're honest-to-goodness historical figures, their portrayal in these films is problematic. Richard is the most troublesome, even though he only has bit parts in 4 of the movies, and in the 5th, the Fairbanks, he's really only involved in the first half, which has nothing to do with Robin Hood in the least, plus a little bit at the end. Historians have been arguing for decades about what kind of person Richard really was. Now, I'm not going to go there. I just want to say that Richard was King of England for just under 10 years, and he only spent about 6 or 7 months in the country. That should show you what kind of king he was. He just used the English treasury to finance his endless military campaigns. He was not the saintly king these films say he was. But neither was anyone else. All medieval kings were rotten bastards. It was just part of the job description. And the bit about him removing his helmet and everybody suddenly recognizing him and kneeling is serious nonsense. Remember, he was only there for 6 months or so, and very unlikely to have ventured far from a castle. The peasantry would have no idea whatsoever what he looked like. And in all 5 movies, he was there at or just before Robin and Marion's wedding, and they lived happily ever after, at least until 1976's Robin and Marion, starring Sean Connery. On the other hand, there's not much disagreement about John. He was the worst. So bad, in fact, that there's never been a John II. No English king would touch the name. Patrick Stewart got it right.
Brother, you have surrounded your given name with a foul stench.
We got some interesting portrayals, though. Well, a bit of a sad sack. suave dandy.
Whoever would have thought my dear brother would be so considerate as to get himself captured and leave all England to my tender care?
A behind-the-scenes puppet master.
You shall be my new sheriff of Nottingham. As sheriff, you will enforce the trespass laws in Sherwood Forest, not with Richard's lenient hand, but to the very letter of those laws.
An MIA, I guess. And a stand-up comedian.
Tell everybody that before the day is out, we shall have a wedding. Or a hanging. Either way, we ought to have a lot of fun, huh?
And their fates are just as varied. In Fairbanks and Flynn, John is banished. In Disney, he's locked in a cell, presumably to await Richard's justice. He's gone AWOL in Thieves, and sent to the Tower of London to be part of the tour in tights. I've previously shown you all of these, although they're totally wrong. In real life, John decamped to Normandy, where Richard found him later that year. Richard declared that John, despite being 27 years old, was merely a child who has had evil counselors, and forgave him, but removed his lands, with the exception of Ireland. So, to some extent, this is true.
It wasn't my fault. I got some really bad advice from Rottingham.
Bullshit!
For the remaining years of Richard's reign, John supported his brother on the continent, apparently loyally. In return for his service, Richard restored John to the county of Gloucestershire and made him again Count of Mortain. Richard died childless, or at least legitimate children, so another minor succession crisis arose in which John was eventually successful. Now, this may seem irrelevant, but stay with me. Now, it's perfectly acceptable to place a fictional story in a historically factual setting. In fact, outside of fantasy and science fiction, every movie and TV show there is does it. But to be effective, the factual setting must be accurate. That's where the later 16th and 17th century modifications to the Robin Hood legendarium fail miserably. The introduction of Richard and John is bad enough, but how they are presented is almost criminal. Now, other than just being there, John is acceptable. He was every bit the scum these stories make him out to be. But Richard, almost everything about him is wrong. Now, here's his actual timeline. Now, July 1189, he ascends to the throne, and actually crowned in September. July 1190, leaves on the crusade. September and October of 1192, reaches a truce with Saladin and departs the Holy Land. December of 92, is captured by the Duke of Austria and turned over to the Holy Roman Emperor. February of 1194, is released from captivity and returns to England. And in 1199, he dies. Trying to correlate these dates with the events in the films is a Herculean task. But fool that I am, I'm going to try. Now, in Fairbanks, it's well established that the English troops are about to march. Therefore, it's July 1190. The business with Guy locking Huntington in the Tower was shown as happening in France, so maybe August? Huntington returns to England. Let's assume October, November. The next Richard scene is after the truce. That's September 1192. Robin Hood appears, quote, after a year passed, unquote. Okay, let's call it September 1193. Now, during all this, Richard is returning. We're never told where or when these scenes occur, but we can assume it would take a good 3, maybe 4 months to make it back. So let's say mid-January 1193. A mysterious stranger appears. But when? Who knows? Since we all already know it's Richard, it can't be before early 1193. And since the last 20 minutes of the film is continuous, it all takes place in 1193. The problem is that Richard spent the entire year of 1193 as a prisoner in Trifles Castle on a hilltop in middle of nowhere, Germany, about 30 miles southwest of Mannheim. He did not return to England until February 1194. Flynn begins with an announcement of Richard's capture in Austria. That was December 1192. But with the speed at which news traveled back then, the announcement would have been more like late January or even February in 1193. Average temperatures this time of year would have been around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, or that's 4 degrees centigrade. No one in the scene is dressed for that kind of weather, but I can excuse that. It's just movie making. Now, Richard is only mentioned a few times in passing. Then, a half hour before the end, another mysterious stranger appears at an inn, this time with a small band of assistant strangers. Who could they be? Chuckle, chuckle. The bishop enters with a couple of priests, and the ensuing conversation suggests the two groups are highly suspicious of each other. But again, if this is Richard, like there's really any doubt, there's no mention of his captivity or his release. We know that Richard didn't return to England until February of 1194. So the events in the movie happened over a period of a year. Now, I'm not going to get into the next few scenes, but then an incognito Richard meets up with Robin, and they set out to rescue Mary and stop John. It's only a day or two later, so it's still early 1194. Too early in the year for the forest to be as green as it is, but that's movie making again. And the rest of the movie is only a few days, so we end in 1194, pretty much right on. Disney out and out says it's 1190. Makes this easier. Disney then generously tells us 2 years have passed, which would be 1192, and the Crusades ended in failure. Well, it ended in a truce, which isn't quite a failure, but certainly not a victory. And they tell us of Richard's capture and ransom. Now, the conversion is very vague due to far too many variables, but 100,000 marks in 1192 would roughly, very roughly, be equivalent to something in the vicinity of $200 million today. Now, everyone leaves out one peripheral piece of information. John is in cahoots with King Philip II of France, trying to raise 80,000 marks to bribe the emperor to keep Richard locked up. This guy will leave no stone unturned in his attempts to be rotten. Ah, a mysterious stranger. Well, it's the third one, so he's not too mysterious to us anymore. But there's a bit of a time compression here. He's back far too soon after being ransomed. We could do Thieves and Tights together since, as far as Richard is concerned, they're the same movie. Tights wisely does not give us a date for the dungeon scene. Thieves foolishly does, 1194, by which time Richard has concluded the truce, left the Holy Land, was captured in Austria and imprisoned for a year, was ransomed, and returned home. Yeah, there's probably still some crusaders in Arab prisons, but Robin wasn't one of them since he didn't go on the crusade. There's no sense of the passing of time in either film, in the larger sense. No way of knowing how many days, weeks, months, or years have passed from one scene to the next. So we have no feel for how long the story lasted. Richard returned in 1194, and if the story indeed also began in 1194, as Thieves suggests, then the whole 2.5-hour movie took no time whatsoever. Tights avoided the whole question of time. Everything just happened when it should. For once, a Mel Brooks movie actually made more sense than a normal movie. The weddings at the end of the movies are very similar, but with the Englishman trying to out-Scottish the Scotsman, Patrick Stewart's are rolling. It's hilarious. One more thing. This is totally trivial, but since we're trying to make things historically accurate, the 3 lions on Richard's coat of arms did not yet exist. He only adopted the design in 1195 after he returned and was trying to reestablish his authority. And it wasn't until 98 that it was in widespread use as the symbol of England. In the time of the Crusade, he used either 1 lion rampant or 2 lions rampant combatant. And these were always gold on red, despite often seeing red on gold in the movies. This may have been due to the way the colors registered on film. Like all else, the complete story is much more complex. But we need to talk about the mysterious strangers. This is an idea that came from the ballads, believe it or not. More precisely, the 7th fit of A Little Jest of Robin Hood. The details are quite different, of course, but the central concept is the same. And it's even more incredible since it's based on an actual event. This is one of the strongest pieces of evidence that the Robin Hood stories took place during the reign of Edward II and not of Richard. Although the mysterious stranger shows up in all 3 of the pre-1990 films, the ballad scene occurs only in Flynn. I'll try to match up a modern English translation of the text where possible. The king and 5 of his knights disguise themselves as monks. They're stopped by Robin and company as they pass through the forest. Some of the dialogue is even the same, or very similar. The amount of the pseudo-abbot's donation is different, but the negotiation is much the same. The mutual declaration of love for Richard is similar, as is the dinner invitation. But once they're all back at Robin's camp, the stories diverge by quite a lot.
What? Are you friendly to our good King Richard? I love no man better. Why, that speech, Sir Abbot, you save half your money. Give me but 30 marks for the poor, and the rest you may keep and welcome. Then I can go free? Any friend of Richard's is free of this forest. Would you honor us by sharing meat with us? Gladly. Then come.
So much for royalty. At the opposite end of the elegance spectrum, we have 2 interesting ladies, neither of whom appeared in the ballads, obviously. First is Mauritania, the witch. I'm guessing the name's a play on Morgana, more commonly known as Morgan Le Fay, an enchantress or sorceress from the Arthurian legends. And the other is Latrine. Not a witch, but John's cook. She does make reference to a witch, however.
Are you certain?
Certain? You want certain? Hire yourself a witch. I'm just your cook. Here. Eat this.
The other big difference is their relationship with the sheriff. Latrine,
I've got the hots for him.
where Mauritania is eventually revealed to be his mother.
I birthed you from this body. I stole a babe in this very castle and killed it, so that you might rise in its place. You're my son.
Well, that certainly explains a lot about him. In any event, the makeup people for both these films deserve an award for these transformations. And along with that, there's the whole devil worship subplot and the druids and that honkin' big Celtic warlord. Last time I saw him, he was beating the crap out of Indiana Jones. Yep, same actor, stuntman Pat Roach. He was also in Temple of Doom and Last Crusade, playing pretty much the same character, a big mean guy, just in different costumes. Well, we've been through over 2 hours of this already, and there's still more to cover, so we'll have another go soon. Thanks for watching. See you again.